I'll tell you how we arrived at Nightingale Village. Nightingale Housing is a triple bottom line housing provider. We exist to revolutionise the way we live together. We want to provide environmentally sustainable housing. We want to make sure that every one of our dwellings is carbon neutral in operations. We want to make sure that when we deliver a precinct or a village, that entire precinct is carbon neutral in operations. We want to make sure that every Nightingale building focuses on building community. And lastly, we want to make sure that every Nightingale building is financially sustainable. We want to deliver them without a profit motive. Instead, we want to provide housing for people, not housing for profit.
Why do we exist? It was originally born out of that frustration by architects about, in Melbourne, how the city was evolving. Historically in Australia, we've been blessed with a lot of space, and we've been able to continue to grow and the great Australian dream of having your fence line in your house and kind of everything you need inside that has been alive and well for a really long time. We're also starting to understand pretty clearly the environmental impacts of a certain way of life. Yeah, it was a combination of a really low quality apartment culture in our city. We think density in our cities is a really important answer to these problems that we're facing. It's about doing density well and building high quality housing that people can live in and call their homes.
So we finished the Commons in 2013. Tamara and I moved in 2014. The incredible thing about it wasn't the architecture, it wasn't the great floorboards, it wasn't double glazing, it wasn't Bonnie Herring's cute, fire service detailing. It was actually the people that we were living with. People started writing to us when we finished the Commons saying, if you ever do another project like that, can you let us know? And so the following year, we purchased a site across the road for Nightingale 1, and we embarked on Nightingale 1. The interesting thing for us was that Nightingale 1 was diagonally opposite the Commons, and what we didn't expect was that those communities that existed within Nightingale 1 and the Commons, both incredibly strong in their own right, would then start to kind of cross-pollinate across the street, across Florence Street. Dan McKenna, who was working at Nightingale Housing at the time, had been watching a planning permit go up in Duckett Street on 7 sites. There was a planning permit granted for a pretty horrific building. When we saw the site in Duckett Street come up for sale, 7 different sites, 7 different opportunities, and we'd seen what had happened in Florence Street, just 2 streets north of that, with 2 buildings, we thought this was an incredible opportunity. At a precinct scale to build community, at a precinct scale to build sustainability, and to really kind of, test and scale this idea about, the fact that community can exist not just within the building, but more broadly within the actual community. And so for us, the Duckett Street dream sprung to life and Nightingale Village sprung to life. So we called our usual supporters. We called Austin Maynard Architects, we called Claire Cousins, we called Kennedy Nolan, we called Architecture, we called Wawoa, and we brought all of these architects together and we said, what if we did this together? What if instead of doing 1 Nightingale at a time, we did 7? What if we closed the street to cars and instead opened it up to pedestrians, to trees, to a little bit of parkland, some seats, some activation, to cyclists, to kids playing. And as usual, it was made possible because each of those architects and Fontic, our development managers, believed in the idea. And we came together, we pitched the idea to a bunch of people and they all put in money. And so we bought the site.
We've seen the impact that we can have with 1 building in 1 street, and then how that changes when we do 2 buildings in 1 street and how the street occupation shifts and how the communities start to interact.
Nightingale Village is a big step forward for us, and to see how we've been able to deliver community for people living in apartments. But then how do we do that at a precinct scale? So how do we bring 203 apartments to life? How do we break that down into 6 different buildings by 6 different architects, 6 different communities? And how do we give each of those communities the opportunity to evolve in their own right and have their own identity? And how do we give them the opportunity to interact with each other as a village? And then how do we give them the opportunity to interact with the broader Brunswick community? How do we do all of that and be carbon neutral? And how do we signal to the rest of the city and perhaps the rest of the country that you can do all of that without any resident having to own a car? That instead there's a possibility to live in the right parts of the city when you've got good public transport, when you're close to a train station, close to a tram, close to a bike path, when you've got all the amenity that you need around there so that you can walk to the shops, the services that you need. And through that, again, you strengthen the ground plane and you activate the streets in your community. And then how can we do all of that equitably?